Hey everybody, welcome back to Matthew Kelly Pottery. I hope you are doing well. In today's video, I'm making some 1-pound vases. Here are the 3 vases I'll make in today's video, and each of these vases will be time stamped so that if you want to skip forward or come back to this video later on and skip to any individual vase, you can do that. So in the description below, there'll be a timestamp for each one. I hope you enjoy it. I'm making these vases at my sit-down wheel, and I showed in a previous video while making 1-pound vases how I raise the wheel up with some bricks underneath the legs. So I've done that with this as well. I'm not going to show that at the moment, but anytime I'm throwing smaller items while sitting down, it can be really helpful to raise the wheel up a little bit so that you're not bending over as much. But here you can see I'm adding a little bit of slip or a little bit of wet clay underneath the bat. That helps the bat stick to the wheel while I'm pulling up the clay. I know other people that do that with a chamois or other ways, but I just tend to have wet clay in my splash pan. It's most readily available, and it just cleans off the bat later on as it's dry. But it really does help the bat stick to the wheel while throwing. This clay has been pugged through my pug mill, so I don't spend a whole lot of time coning up and down to wheel wedge the clay or anything like that. I just center it and then start opening and pulling the clay. You can see now here after I've had it centered, what I'll do is I tend to open, especially smaller clay balls, I push down with the thumb on my left hand assisted by my right hand on top of it, and then I pull out from the base there to make the bottom of the piece. My first little movement after that is to cone up the clay if I'm making something tall and skinny to make like a beehive shape. And then my first pull is kind of like a claw pull with my left hand assisted by my right hand. Now I'm going to go to a normal pull here where I have one hand on the inside, one on the outside, a sponge in my right hand to keep the clay wet on the outside as I'm pulling. You can see I'm using mostly the fingertip of my middle finger on my right hand, and then also below that my ring finger, kind of pushing against the same 2 fingers on the opposite hand on the inside. I always like to clean off around the bottom of the cylinder before I do the next pull. I always use the sponge to add water to the clay before I start pulling, and then as I'm pulling. As I get to the top, you can see I'll stop pulling kind of on the outside and use my thumb on my left hand to kind of finish that pull and push that back in. I found that really helpful to finish off the top of a pull, because I want to leave a little bit of clay in the top because I'm making vases that have a skinny neck on top. So I don't want to pull too much of the clay out of the top. Here you can see I'm adding a little bit of water from the rib, and now I'm going to start using this rib to do some shaping where I push in at the base first, and then support it on the inside with my hand, and then I'm going to push out towards the rib with my left hand. I'll also use the tip of the rib there to clean off the excess clay at the base, and at the beginning of this shaping I'm going to lift the rib up off the wheel a little bit and push in, leaving a little bit of clay to protrude out at the base, and that's how I'm going to make the foot at the bottom of the vase. I do that on a lot of my pieces, and it's just a convenient way to do that without having to come back later and trim that. I can actually just form it while shaping, and then as I form the belly of the pot there, now I'm going to use the tip of the rib to round off, kind of undercut, and then use my left hand to round off that foot. Now I'm going to clean the excess water out of the inside of the vase, and once I've done that, I'm going to wet the sponge and adding water to just the top like third of the pot there, so then I can then start necking in the vase. So I'm mainly using kind of like my left hand in a circle form, and then the fingertips on my right hand to squeeze that in. And just about every time I squeeze in, I want to also then pull up. So here I'm kind of squeezing in twice, but you can see how the top's starting to get a little uneven. So a lot of times I will cut that off or pull first and then cut that off, because I want to, as you're taking it from say 3 inches wide to 1 inch wide, you know, that clay's getting thicker, and so you want to keep that pulled up as you're bringing it in. You don't want to just keep getting it thicker and thicker and thicker. Also, as it tends to buckle a little bit, you want to pulling it after you've necked it in helps with that. Now you'll probably see here I'm gonna add a little bit more water. Now I'm going to trim off that top, to make it even along the top. I don't want to trim very much because I want to keep as much clay there as possible. You can see I've got a pretty good thickness still all the way up at that neck, and now I'm going to smooth that over and then come back. I'm adding the water this time with my hand, but you can see how it dripped down a bit more than adding it with the sponge. Now I'm going to neck in with fingertips on each hand, and now I'm going to go back and pull from here. Maybe I'm gonna neck it in a little bit more with both fingertips, and then I'll finish up with a pull with my right hand on the outside and just my index finger on the inside. Like I said, my left hand is kind of there to kind of steady everything, but doing most of the pulling between my index finger, my thumb on my left hand, and my middle finger on my right hand. Just trying to get that shape. Then I'll go back over it here with my rib. I always like to check that shoulder with my rib, not only to make that kind of like a smooth shape, but as I'm necking it in, you probably saw earlier that I use that rib to work on that shoulder, because the last thing I want when making a skinny neck bottle is to get a really sharp curve right at that top of the belly, because that will make a weak spot where the clay could start to collapse or wobble. And so there we go. The first vase is now finished, and we're getting ready to start the second one. You can see this bat here actually has a little bit of that clay on it. So this one I have flipped over from the previous time it was used. It had some clay left on it from whatever I threw on the other side before, and had put a little bit of clay down before. So this one also has some wet clay underneath it. But this one also I switched and have an angle from the top as well as from the side, so that you can see a little bit different angle. This is going to be another vase that has quite a tall skinny neck on it with just a little bit of design in the neck, as you saw from the picture at the beginning with the timestamp. So all the same motions as I did with the first one. There'll be little variation just based on the shape that I'm going to make, but you can see here how I'm coning that in to make that beehive shape, and then I do this claw pull between my index finger and my thumb on my left hand. Also, I have my middle finger and all the other two wrapped around the back side of the vase, all from my left hand, and then my right hand kind of is using fingertips to move that up. Now I'm going to more of a traditional pull. Like I said, you can see there my fingertip on my middle finger on my right hand doing most of the work. But all, like I said, supported. I try to keep my hands touching each other. That's one thing that I think is really important when you go to pulling. You'll see here as I start to pull, my hands are as close together as they can be. Once my right hand gets up far enough, you'll see, I mean, they're touching each other there. You know, it's touching the sponge. Sometimes I'll even reach over with my thumb on my left hand and touch it to my right hand just to make it more steady. Like I said, I start out, I always like to try to clean up around the base so I don't build up too much clay at the base, and it gives me a good clean spot to start pulling or shaping from. Once again, I'm starting out by pushing on the bottom of the cylinder with the rib. Each time I do a shape, I want to clean off the rib and then clean off around the base. As you see there, look, I'm going to lift up off the bat a little bit and push in, leaving that little bit of clay at the base there. This is a tricky thing to do. It took me quite a long time to really get comfortable doing that, but now that I do, it's pretty easy on just about everything I make to leave that little bit of clay there that I can make that foot out of, and it really gets a finished look to the base of the piece. Alright, once again, I'm just cleaning that little bit of water out that was on the inside there, and then I'm going to add water with the sponge to just the top kind of half there, and then start pinching it. You can see there my left hand wrapped around almost 3/4 of the neck, and then just pushing in with fingertips on the right hand. But as I said before, my hands are touching, helps keep my hands steady. Here I'm going to do another pinch in, starting with fingertips, and see how that feels, and if it's okay, I just continue with fingertips or reach in like that, because then, like I said, I have a bit more control with my hand all the way around that neck, or most of the way around it. You can see a little bit of wobble in that neck already. There's no perfect pots, and not every single one I make is going to be without a wobble, but one of the great things is that, as I said on the first one, by pulling here, I can actually help get rid of that wobble. I can kind of pull through it real steady like, and lifting up, and I'm pulling some of that unevenness to the rim, which I then cut off. You can still see a little bit of wobble just above the shoulder of the belly, but in the end you probably won't see that at all, especially with it sitting still. After cutting off, I always add water before I use my needle tool to cut off, and then I add some water afterward to round that off, because I don't want to leave a rough spot at the top for that rough clay to catch on any part of my hand or my fingers. Here you can see I'm doing that pull again, where my index finger on my left hand is down inside, my thumb and my middle finger on my right hand, my thumb on my left hand and my middle finger on my right hand doing most of the work on the outside. Now I'm going to add some water and pinch in from there, make a really tall skinny neck out of this. This is obviously one of the trickiest parts of making any piece, whether it be small or large. Of course, the larger you get, the harder it is to do something like this. I'm not doing much of a pull there at all, more of kind of like a shaping, just trying to get the shape that I want, get a really nice smooth curve to the neck there, going in and then back out. Sometimes, as you can see there, I'm shaping down. I don't always just shape from the bottom up. Sometimes I'll push in and then go down with my shape. Now you can probably see here I'm going to sponge the top. I usually go back over the shoulder with the rib, but if I feel like it's rounded enough and got a smooth curve there, then I don't do that. Clean off all the way around the bottom and all the back. Now I'm actually adding a little bit of water with my sponge right to that midsection of the neck, so I can come with the pointy part of my rib and make these little grooves in the neck, just a little something to add a design element, as well as a place for glaze to break, all those kinds of things, just something to break up the body of the vase. And also if you have a glaze that can work with different facets, it gives a great place for glaze to break. I actually, right there, I noticed there's a little bit of a clay on the neck there just from my finger, the way I pulled it off, and I was like, oh, I want to get that off before I take the pot off the wheel. So you can see how it stuck to the bat there as I used the screwdriver to pry it off. It had to pop up a little bit. You have to be careful about that, because if it's on there too well and you go to pop it up, you can throw a piece off by doing that. So you have to be careful about that. Sometimes I'll actually torch pieces before I lift them off so that they don't have that happen as I'm lifting them off. So, well, I'm going to leave you here with the voiceover and just put some music behind this third one. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for all your support on YouTube, Instagram, all my social media, Patreon, and I'll be having an online sale coming up in February of gas-fired work. So if you're interested in that, you can check back on any of my social media or my website, which is, all those links are in the description below, as well as the timestamps. And also had a short and a reel of a 1 pound vase on Instagram and YouTube. I'll link those in the description as well. So hope you enjoy them, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.